for coming to CPW's weekly artist talk night, Meet the Artist. We love being here every week, and it's really nice to see people and new faces every week. So thank you for coming. My name is Sarah Danziger. I am the Education Program Manager here at the Center for Photography. You are currently sitting in our most recent exhibit by Adriana All, curated by CPW's Adam Giles Ryan. There's a talk with her from a few weeks ago back on our YouTube. A lot of our talks are actually archived on the YouTube. So if you ever miss one or you can't come in person, it's great to catch it online. We have some really great talks coming up soon. Next week, we've got Kate Stesu and Letha Wilson. We're going to round out February with Nestor Perez Moliere. And then we'll start in March with Phyllis Galembo. And there's a lot of other great ones coming up after that. So please come back or tune in from home. Tonight, we're joined by Onaje Benjamin, who is an award-winning photographer with a background in social activism. In addition to his photography, Onaje is a picture framer, a really great picture framer. I had some wonderful, beautiful frames done by Onaje, and maintains a studio at the Cunneen-Hackett Arts Center in Poughkeepsie, New York. He has exhibited in galleries in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. He currently has a solo show at the Woodstock Artists Association and Museum. I believe it's open through this Saturday. So if you get out to Woodstock, please check that out. He is a recipient of the Guaranteed Income for Artists Creatives Build New York grant, and in 2022 received the Lelani Claire Award for Outstanding Achievement in Photography. He recently co-curated an exhibition at WAAM entitled Behind the Veil, showcasing 10 regional and nationally known artists. Onaje defines himself as a documentary photographer, capturing imagery at the intersections of culture, politics, and social justice. Please, let's give a warm welcome to Onaje. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all for coming out on this brisk evening. Maybe a little background. What I hope to do tonight is show you some of my work and talk about it a little bit. And the reason I use the term storytelling is that I found that that's what has worked for me in terms of taking the pictures, interacting when I can with people in the community. I was born in Harlem, 1948, which all I can think about is my granddaughter, and my wife's here, once asked us if there were, what did she ask, if there were cars when we were, yeah, she wanted up there. So that's what happens when you tell a teenager you're born in 1948. I started dealing with cameras in the late 70s and the 80s. At that time, I lived in Trenton, New Jersey, and it's like a lot of cities today. It's one of the cities of, even back then, which was transitioning from a factory town, to something else. So there were a lot of the old buildings and the railroad tracks cutting through the communities and things like that. But I would say then gentrification wasn't as strong energy as it is today. But I used to love to walk around. Then I was doing film. I had an old Yashica camera and taking pictures. And I worked in the dark room, which I kind of miss a little bit. It was kind of like a Zen thing. I'm also a Buddhist, but once you turn that red light on, you're in there. Sometimes I come out the next day and the sun's out again. I was out there all night. So I do miss that. And I enjoyed taking pictures in the community. Like I said, I struggle between street documentary photographer. I document things. That's what street photographers do. That's what all photographers do. And behind every picture there is a story. That old picture's worth 1,000 words kind of a thing. So I did a lot of film work back then. A couple of my pictures then, which I don't even have anymore. One was used in the National Democratic Committee when Carter was running for campaign. It was a shot I took of a bunch of brothers sitting on some soapboxes, kicking back with some 40s back then. And the sign at the beginning of the street said Dead End Street. So that was actually wound up on a flyer that was used for the National Democratic Committee. So it's kind of cool about that. And then I moved to South Jersey, town called Absecon, right outside Atlantic City. And how I kind of stumbled into picture framing was, and I'm sure there are people in the room doing this all the time, is I was taking pictures. I had no frames. So I used to run out to a flea market, buy a bunch of old frames, and I come back home and I'm re-gluing them together and trying to sand them and paint them and everything, and my partner then said, why don't you try learning some picture framing? So I went around, I don't know anything about South Jersey, but Benton, there's some pretty affluent communities where there were frame shops and nobody was interested in working with me at that time. And on the way out of one place in the garbage can, there was a trade magazine. I took it, it was Decor. They were having a trade show at the Jacob Javits. I ran out to the mall, to Keysauc back then. This is early pre-technology, I guess. And got some cards made up, and I made my make-believe company called Up Against the Wall. And I took that into New York City, got into the trade show, spent 3 days, slept in the subways, whatever, came out with a $3,000 credit and got to play with a whole bunch of toys, and that's how I began to get into it. The danger of being both a picture framer, you might say, well, I'd love to be able to do that, is you can wind up with a whole lot of frame stuff in your house. If you sell it, that's great. But if not, it's a lot of framing. But also what I did is at the time, the casinos were just starting to explode in South Jersey. And there was a lot of energy around working with, minority businesses. So I got my foot in the door, believe it or not, with a company that starts with the letter T. I did get paid most of the time. But I started doing framing there. But what happened, and I know this has happened to any of you as artists, but I got so into generating, making the frames for the industry, I put my camera down. And I really wasn't getting out, So there was money coming in, whatever, but I just never got back to that. And it seemed that it went that way. My background, as my bio says, is also in community activism. I've worked throughout the South for some groups. One's called Virginia Community Development Organization. It's mentioned in on the People's History of the United States. A lot of grassroots stuff in the rural South, and that was really enjoyable. I've worked with the United Farm Workers Union and some other organizations also, and those are really good years. But I didn't touch a camera for quite a while until just before COVID. And a friend of mine had a Canon, a small Canon, an M series Canon, and he loaned it to me to start shooting again. Hey, Dan. But it was a different experience. That's the first thing I just want to say about it. I went out with my camera and I was moving around, and the first thing I noticed was how guarded people were compared to 30 years ago when I was out with the camera. Trying to point it at someone and realizing because of social media and a lot of the issues that are going on today, people are rightfully in many cases, concerned about why are you taking my picture? Who are you? What are you doing? Whatever. Actually, my stepson, was it Spain he came back from, was Shirley? I forget what country it was, but Milan, yeah, I think it was one of those places, some of the communities there, they don't even allow street photographers. But I picked up the digital camera. It was a different animal. I wasn't in the dark room. But I enjoyed, taking some pictures and printing them at that time. And then I started, showing some of the pictures around. And then to my surprise, and I say that because I remember filling it out and then I forgot all about it, I became a recipient of this guaranteed income, which is really a nice little pot of money to have. It's all gone now, but but it was nice to have a nice income coming in. It's a good concept that artists have a right to have a guaranteed income, as many other people would have. So once I had a little bit of extra resources, when I went out, I found out that it was hard for me. I felt, I guess, awkward trying to shoot people. But then COVID came along and then emptied the streets. So I did a lot of night shooting in the beginning. And I think I've been in enough people's houses now that the cemetery became a friend of mine. Not a close friend, but a friend of mine, because it was a place I could go and practice getting used to the camera without necessarily running into a lot of people or anything like that. And then as I began to get my confidence built up again, and some of my mentors are here. Charles Purvis, we were just asking about how we met, but I'm glad he came into my life because he's one of my mentors that helped to build my confidence back up and helped me get looking at what photography actually is in art and enforcing the fact that I do have a skill set around that. I'm not necessarily a technical photographer. I'm self-trained. I guess I saw somebody call it, I'm a YouTuber, I guess, in some ways. I still make a lot of mistakes. But I'm learning as I go. So some of the work I want to show you tonight, one is my other challenges besides even interacting with people is the idea of engaging and getting out there to do the work, the motivation. I was telling Charles, a friend of mine who now lives in the Midwest, we had a friend for the last 20 years. Every Saturday morning they got together, went and got a coffee, and they walked around the streets in that. You know, my stepson, which a few people here who have met, Omar, he does the same thing, you know, walking around all the time, you know, and am I motivated? Yes, but it would really help if you're working with another person around that, you know. So what I did is I started developing projects. That was my way of structuring my work. You know, I said, well, I'm going to do a project on this, whether it's the community or it's different projects. So I have titles for each category because that's how I framed it. But it got me out of the house. It got the camera in my hand, and that's what was important to me, and still continues to be important. And if anyone has a question along the way, I got a good amount of pictures, but I think I can get through them, and then hopefully with some time to as we used to say, you know, kick it. Oh, one other thing I did, which I'm not sure it's in the bio, but I worked for 15 years. I'm also, I just want to throw it out there because I think it's important, not just to me, but for second chance people. I'm also formerly incarcerated. You know, so when I was one of the first formerly incarcerated people that got hired by the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office. I worked there for 15 years as a counselor, you know, working with that community. And then when I retired, I went in Shawangunk. If you're here, some people know it's outside of, it's a Supermax. All right, but I worked for an organization that put colleges in those prisons, and I set up a 2-year degree program there. Matter of fact, one of the first nights I came home and said to Shirley, I saw this little old man, he was waving at me, and he went to, you know, in D block. Turns out, son of Sam. He's an old man, and he's a pastoral assistant. That's what he does now. So there's a story for you. But you know, but that helped also. And one of the stories I just came up for me in my head now is I watched a documentary. I cannot think of the name of it now. But it was about an architect, a photographer, and architect who began to communicate with a man in prison. He'd been in maximum security for 30 years, and all he could see was what out the window. So she started asking him if he was ever released and was free, what kind of home would he build? So she'd send him pictures of things from the community, and then he would work with her to try to design the house. I thought it was kind of phenomenal. Herman's house, thank you. Beautiful, great documentary. So that was something that I did. And at the Dutchess County Jail, I also had something I called it cinema therapy. But every week I had a 3-hour group where I showed independent films to the 50 men on my unit that I worked with, and then we'd talk about them. And I picked the films, and there were things like that, you know, all kinds of, you know, sharp, kind of edgy things that work with people. But it's also a backdoor way to get into working with people around, particularly men or young men, around feelings. You know, I could show a film, and you know, and you can hear guys sniffling, the lights out because something hit them. But if I tried to do that in a group, it wasn't going to happen because people have to keep their shields up. So I'm going to go through these areas. I won't apologize for a little structure, but it helps keep me focused also. And this is something new. I've worn, in one of my bios, I say I've been looking through a lens since I was 3 because I've been wearing glasses since I was 3. But a couple of years ago, I had eye surgery. And now the only time I needed was like 8 inches. Other than that, so I'm still getting. My wife says, "Why are you still wearing glasses?" You know, sometimes if you ever used to wearing glasses and you look in the mirror, sometimes you don't even recognize yourself. So hopefully this will okay. So one of the areas, of course, is street life. This is a scene in Midtown Poughkeepsie. That's why I live in Poughkeepsie, New York right now. But when I first moved up here in the 90s, I lived in Woodstock, Saugerties, Esopus, Highland. My wife and I, we missed the side of the river. So that's what I'll say about it. But this is a gentleman that has a barbecue Caribbean restaurant, but in the summers, he rolls out one of these big tanks and cranks up a whole bunch of jerk chicken in that grill. And when I went up there to begin to take pictures, I actually approached the 2 brothers that were sitting in the background there and asked them if it was okay to take some pictures. And it was fine, that's cool. But after about 15 minutes, and I was, working with Charles, I was making sure just to take one, just take a number of pictures. Finally, the guy said, "Okay, you got to go." I said, "What?" He said, "No, that's enough." And so I said, and I had to start having a conversation with them. That's what I mean by storytelling with them. And what I did is I pointed up. And I was pointing to the CCTV cameras that are all over the place. All right, the Poughkeepsie police are now using drones, to track people in the community. So I said, I'm not your problem here. But again, I was facing the whole issue of, they're sitting there having a meal, and that's their space, that part of the community, but that was one of the interactions I had. And what I do because I do frame, I went back and gave a framed picture to this business. It's in the store. I do that sometimes with places. Now, the story I tell along with this is that, I don't know about some of you, but, and yeah, I'm going to refer a lot to my stepson Omar because he's an amazing photographer and I learn a lot from him also. But, he says, keep your camera with you all the time. And I always said that one day I won't have my camera, a flying saucer is going to land in front of me. The Martians are going to get out and they're going, could you take a picture of us? I'm going to have my camera. So I was on my way to a supermarket and I heard this beautiful music, violin music. And I actually thought it was so clear, I thought it was coming from somebody's high-end car, their speaker system. And then I turned around, I saw this gentleman there, all right, who's from Romania. He's a construction worker, but his father played in the Romanian symphony. And I love the sign he had there. I want to ask my girlfriend to marry me I need the money for a ring. So I stopped and we talked a bit. The first picture I took was with my iPhone, but then I ran back home. He said he's going to be here for when I came back. I actually ran across another gentleman in LaGrange, which is a little further out of Poughkeepsie, a couple of days later playing a violin, a different individual who's from Italy with his, he had about a four-month-old child and his wife there. And they were just trying to, raise money to stay alive. This is a picture. I don't know if any of you how familiar you are with Poughkeepsie, but this is Market Street. And if you were going to the right down the street, you'd run into the Bartavon, which is the sister or brother, to this UPAC across the street. And I found this interesting because, and I called it gentrification, and all these are titled, because the bank had crashed and closed a number of years back, right? Then this HOFA, which I thought was kind of hilarious. What's this say stands for that? Oh, Hair on Hudson Academy. Who wouldn't want that bumper sticker on their car, right? But there's a lot of these schools, and the reason I think it's ironic is that there are a lot of these predatory quasi-vocational training facilities tend to wind up in poor or communities of color that offer the same education you could get at, SUNY Ulster, for 3 times the price. And they mine the communities. They get people to come in. They do all the paperwork for their student loans, but probably 80% of them drop out. I mean, it's the kind of school that Trump got nailed on and had to pay $25 million back to people for. And then again, some of my mentors like Charles and other people said, I just had the bank, I had the flags, I thought it was good enough. He said, wait. And then this gentleman came by, probably unhoused, I hope not, but we had 2, 3, 30-gallon cans, recyclables. So I just thought framing him in the context of that made a statement to do that. This was a farm on 4455, which actually I actually sold one of these pictures to a person who grew up down the street from there. It was not a functioning farm at the time, but how I knew about it is that my wife's mother was in, what was that? Lutheran Care, right? Facility, excellent facility, but that's where she was for the last 5 years of her life. And when you sat up on the hill from the facility, you could see this farm down there. What happened was, because, and this is post-COVID, I don't know about Ulster, but 7,000 people moved into Dutchess County. 7,000. So these developments just blew up all over the place. And we used to love going by there because there were a few animals there, right? Sure, there were chickens, and we just love to see a little bit of rural life along that road there. And this is what's there now. Yeah, and every house looks identical, and I mean, there's I can count them, but there's got to be 500 or 600 units just on this side of the street. They wiped everything out, and they're building on the other side. And people need housing, but the farm's gone. And a friend of mine who you might know because he works with the Good Works Institute, Susan Grove, said it was some of the richest farmland left in Dutchess County, and now it's gone. So those are some of the stories that go with that. Crossroads Chess Community. An architect, European-American man, who loves chess, wanted to do something in the city of Poughkeepsie. And in this particular shot, that gateway, that's actually a walkway near a place called the Artifact or the Trolley Barn, which you've ever been over there. It's a really amazing place. It's evolving into a great art center. But that alleyway was a place where people were using drugs and all kinds of shady things are going on there. So he started a community chess program throughout the city for young kids to play chess. All right, so that's now a place that had needles and syringes and all kinds of other godly things on the ground. Now, I love these twins, two guys. I have another picture of them when I was taking pictures. There was an empty chair, and they were going like this. Have a seat. So another project was, and it's coming up in April again, but there's a convention center in Poughkeepsie, and I noticed on their billboard there was a tattoo conference coming for 3 days, 200 artists or whatever. I've always wanted to get a tattoo, never have, didn't get one that day. But I went in there, and I thought it was really interesting. My first impression walking into this place was it looked almost like a morgue because you had like 100 adjustment tables. People were laying and getting tattooed, and all stomach, butts, thighs, heads, back. There were just 200 artists working constantly, tattooing people for 3 days. And I kind of thought I was in the right place because I heard over the loudspeaker I went the last day, and they said, we have a raffle and the prize at 4:00. We're going to have a prize for it. It's a human skull. I said, woo. It was a human skull. And somebody said to me, is that legal? I said, I don't know. I think I was talking to you about that, Tara. Is it legal to sell human skulls? But I got some really interesting pictures. I love this woman there. She had the piercings alone, that the woman had, but I just love the focus of the artist, and I know it was you, Charles, that said to me, because all the shots I had, there was paper towels in the background, but that's part of what they do. They were constantly tatting, and they're wiping and tatting and wiping. So no matter which angle I took a shot from, I couldn't get a roll of paper towels out of the scene. And this is another woman I just thought, first her concentration. I think this is at the WAAM show, but also the tat that she has on her arm. It's just gorgeous, So it's an interesting kind of a thing. Comic-Con. I'd never been to one. Anybody been to Comic-Cons here? Did you dress up? Okay, I had to ask because again, if I hadn't had Omar with me, I would have been lost because people were dressed in all these cartoons, and I have no idea. I mean, my last hero was Popeye. That's how old my ass is, But there were some very interesting shots. I love this trio. And the place this is the same convention center that had the tattoo place. Okay, so it's just reconfirmed again. I love this one too. The cowboy hat, and I'm not sure what character she's supposed to be, but they were really nice. And this is the Captain and Spider family. But my favorite is this crew. That's a father-son team. And one of the things I love about it is, look at his shirt, he's an anti-mutant. So I just thought it was kind of sweet to see a father-son team going around there and really got into it with the wig and everything else. Portraitures, I'm getting more into that, but mine are usually in community. This one I called Band of Brothers, and this is on North Hamilton Street in Poughkeepsie. And the first time I came past, there were three older brothers on a porch, but what drew my eye was the Marine statue chained to the porch. So I said, I got to go back and talk to these guys. And I did. And there was a third gentleman who actually owned the statue, but he had to go to the VA center. But the gentleman on the left is a Desert Storm veteran, and the brother on the right is a veteran from the Vietnam era. So I just thought it was kind of interesting. I had to talk with them. It was a Saturday morning, and I enjoyed kind of kicking with them. And they really were okay taking the picture again, trying to engage them. And it's not that I ask everybody that I take a picture. Can I take your picture? I'm a street photographer. I don't do that. But I just thought these guys were really interesting. This gentleman is a deacon, and I hope he's still with us. I haven't seen him in quite a while. This was a couple of years ago. And he was at Walrus Park, which is right along the Hudson River near the Walkway Bridge. And again, trying to build up my courage of taking pictures. I walked up, we started a conversation. Hey, we're both gray hairs. I got gray hair, you got gray hair. And we're kicking it back and forth. And then I looked over his shoulder. You can't see it in this shot. But I saw another car pull up and another woman getting out with somebody assisting her. She had a cane. I said, I guess we're not going to be the only gray hair here today anymore, Deacon. And he turns around and he goes, that's my sister. He said, for 70 years, I've been trying to just get away for one moment. And there she is. You know, and she had the mask on. I asked her to take a picture of him, but I think it's one of the pictures, my better pictures of a powerful elderly, you know, family doing work around that. So now I said, you know, my background's in social justice work, and I've been trying to deal with it. This is around the Dobbs decision, rightfully so, where communities were up in arms. But I'm old enough to remember being involved in some of those marches. But what I found interesting today is all the children, you know, involved in this and the signs that they're carrying. This is a very interesting one here. You know, have a vasectomy, and the one I saw that was in it was mentioned that I helped Dan Goldman, hi Dan. We were selected to curate a show at WAAM that we called Behind the Veil. And Sandy Morales is an amazing photographer, mostly works with women and body images. She had a scene from a protest in New York City, and one woman had a sign that said, if I wanted politics in my womb, I'd screw a senator. It's amazing. I just thought this is a very sweet couple, mother and daughter team. The next couple shots in this scene were actually taken last April. So this is before the tragedy on October 7th. But this was in Rhinebeck. You were there with me, Dan, right? Yes. That day. There was a protest there. So this is the one side of it, but I also tried to deal with the other, you know, both aspects of it. But it was kind of interesting, you know, and it was fairly peaceful compared to what's going on now. In this shot, which actually in a recent show, I submitted it and they asked me not to show it, exhibit it after October 7th. But this gentleman on the left is an IDF veteran. You know, he lives in New Paltz, I believe. And you'll see him, I guess, with the women in black. I think they've been protesting every Saturday morning, and he's usually there. But I met him in Rhinebeck. But I love the sign he had at that time. You know, and I think it's important to document these things. You know, I think that the more we move into corporate media and you know, control points and stuff like that. I don't know if you've ever heard of some kind of protest, went home, looked for it on TV, and looked for it. It's not even in the primetime news. You know, it's Taylor Swift or something's going on. Does anybody here familiar with Poet Gold? Amazing poet. She was also in our show. We had one of her poems on the wall at WAAM. But she did a video, and I think if you Google it on YouTube, you can find the video. But that, I can show this way, that tall justice puppet is Sabrina, who's a dear friend of mine. And actually, Shirley and I have a show opening tomorrow night in Poughkeepsie at Sabrina's Gallery. But she's inside of that. You know, and what I didn't know until after the fact is, I said, well, you know, why is Poet Gold why are they holding hands? You know, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that. And she said, if she did, she would have fallen. She can't see inside that. You know, she can't see where she's going. So, but this is a protest in Beacon. And it's around Say Their Names, and it's about the intersection between, you know, police violence and the sad loss of life that we have a lot of people. But the Say Their Names thing evolved because in the beginning, it was George Floyd, there were women losing their lives also. And so the Say Their Name was also about recognizing and honoring that the women, unfortunately, are involved in that. And the video, there's a small choir group that sings a song behind it about Say Their Names. This is really sweet. So they did that, you know, in Beacon. Snug. I would have probably named it something different, don't know what. But Snug, what do you think Snug is? Look at the letters. Guns. All right, and you should be thankful, not that, you know, because again, I lived in Ulster for a great deal of my time up here, so I know a little bit about, you know, Kingston, and it's not a crime-free community, but Snug is an organization that uses mostly former gang members, former people who are in the system, to try to shut down the violence in the community. And Newburgh has a Snug chapter. I don't know if it's still true. I hope it isn't. But at one time, per capita, Newburgh was the most violent city in New York State. I mean, per capita, per 100,000 people, how many people were getting shot and killed? It was up there. Beacon was up there too at one time. And there seems to be a pattern to me, and call me paranoid if you want, and a tension between gentrification and that. It almost seems like they let crime, the police kind of step back, things get out of control, people leave, and then people step in again, around that. But Snug is an amazing group, and I've been documenting some work in Mount Vernon, Troy. I was trying to get up to Buffalo when that horrible tragedy at the supermarket. I couldn't get up there. But these are just a few pictures. This is the team for the city of Poughkeepsie. And how it works is most of the work they do, the most powerful work they do, you don't see them because they're behind the scenes stopping a shooting from occurring. Or if a shooting occurs, then they're out working with the different opposing groups, so there's no retaliatory work. But this young team of people are the ones to work in the community. And when there is a shooting, they have what they call a response. They'll go to that corner, and they have flyers and signs. You see a brochure in the brother's hand there, and they hand out posters. They have a loudspeaker, and they talk to people in the neighborhood. And again, the tension between the media. There was a shooting last summer where 2 people got shot, but then when we had the response, a woman came out of her house, and she had a coffee can with about 30 rounds. Somebody had fired an automatic weapon. The shells were all over the street, but again, the papers aren't going to tell you that, right, around that. But that's the Snug team, which I really respect a lot of, and I've been covering them for 2 years. This was a scene at a response. Actually, the gentleman on the right, I knew. He got killed. He was a gangbanger years ago, left Dutchess County, moved to the West Coast. And I've seen this happen, sadly, 2 or 3 times. He came back for a weekend and got killed, and sometimes it's there's no rational justification for violence as far as I'm concerned. But in this situation, and the other people I know who lost their lives, the new younger gang members wanted a notch on their belt. So they'd go after somebody who was, at one point was higher up in the, on the rankings later. But this was a T-shirt that the families had. This is a young sister. The day before I took this picture, and I was there the day before, her 19-year-old son was killed on that spot. And the balloon was because he had just gotten his GED. And I lived about 3 blocks down the street from this particular scene. And a few days later, and I did talk to her about everything, and I'd asked if I could come to the funeral. Beulah Baptist is again, I'm a Buddhist. Beulah Baptist is a very powerful Christian church in the city of Poughkeepsie. And over the years, they've actually offered to have funerals there for people who couldn't afford them, and we're behind it. So her son had his funeral at that church. And I could have gone there to shoot it. Then the last minute I said, I don't want to really deal with that. But she came back the next day with some candles just to light them. Now, the Reapers. What do you think the Reapers might be? A women's professional football team. And this is Trentino. I work with her. I'm also an MSW clinician. She's a clinician at the agency. I work for Family Services, but she also, when they told me she played, so I went up to Connecticut, and the team they're playing against is from Canada. And something I always wondered about, I used to be more of a jock back in the day, but you ever watch a game and you see the cameraman's on the side, all of a sudden he gets run over by 3 linebackers? Well, that almost happened to me because you get so focused through the lens at what you're trying to capture. And also, if you're lucky, you hear some rumbling on the ground. And lucky, I could have been run over by this particular play. But it was very powerful, spending like 3 hours it was a different kind of an energy. No less rough. They hit. They ain't playing. This is no flag football league. They hit and hit hard. And I just love that scene. But that's the Reapers. Hudson Horrors. Want to guess what this might be?
Halloween.
Roller derby. I was shooting at the Pride Festival, which is at Warwick Park in Poughkeepsie, and I saw a whole bunch of 2 groups came in, and I'm working with another group, which is a all women's biker gang. But then behind them, some women came roller skating in. So I talked to them later, and actually, of all the different projects they've had, it took me 2 months of negotiating back and forth with them to come in and practice their scrimmages. But it was amazing. This is at Hyde Park Arena. Some are banked, but they have games. And getting back, you'll see in a minute the names. I love the way the horror, on the back of her pants. But my first email I got when I asked about, being able to capture some of their scrimmages, the woman's name was Son of Slam. I didn't mention Son of Sam before, but that's her nickname in the sport. And you can see here, Waffle House Wendy. They just have all these really interesting names. Not just them. Wait for it. The refs. Trampling Bias. Phil Bogany. So there's an energy there. It's a really kind of a take back to the working class kind of, days. And I have to admit, come out of my closet, that when I was a kid, I loved roller derby. That and wrestling, but they had the bank things that throw people over the guardrails and stuff like that. So that was, again, looking at projects. I just got an email from Son of Slam about giving me their schedule for this year, and also for the football team. I love jazz, straight up jazz, more so than fusion. And how many people here are familiar with Jazz in the Valley? Ooh. Okay, a few people are. Okay. It actually started here. Now they have their concerts at Warriors Park in Poughkeepsie. But Jazz in the Valley was born right on 9W there at the vineyard, that wine vineyard there, right to get on 9W, right outside of Sopus. And it's in its 25th year now. And Greer Smith, who's just an amazing person, has been stewarding that for 20-something years. And they just recently renovated and opened up a building. I want to say it's 107 Henry Street. Henry Street, right. It's a gorgeous building. And I think she named it the New Hudson River School. And it's there to highlight particularly the work, music, and jazz. And every Sunday for the next probably 6 weeks, if you got nothing to do, it's going to be $10 to get in. They have world-class jazz musicians, right? A few blocks from here on the other side of town. And I've been capturing that too. I used to shoot it back when I used to work in the day, but I got back into it. So this past summer. It's a brother named Nelson. These are, getting world-class vibraphonists and sax players. This is on the Hudson River. This was shot at across the street. It's the theater associated with where Shirley and I have studios. Hey, Deb.
Hi, how are you? Sorry.
And Cunneen-Hackett, and you should come over to see it sometime. It's mostly open during the week. But Cunneen-Hackett Arts Center was actually once owned by the Vassar brothers, and this is a theater across the street. And I don't know a lot about that period of history, but I guess they said people that had the kind of money that the Vassar brothers had their own theaters. They didn't go to somewhere; they built their own theaters. So this is an amazing theater, and this is Dr. Craig Harris, and this was the introduction of a piece he did called Blueocracy. So I spent the whole evening listening to the presentation. And shooting different angles. I mean, I had probably 20 shots of all these. This is back with Jazz in the Valley. That's Javon Jackson. And a brother on the bass is a brother named Williams, who I've been following for 30 years. But it's just nice the energy to be there, taking the pictures and interacting with the artist. Might be it. That's about it for now. So anybody have any questions? Yes.
What do you like about working in black and white?
Good question. I guess except for the Sunday comics when I grew up, everything else was in black and white. I think it's a much more powerful presentation. I think it renders almost any color picture an abstract. Forget who it was. It might have been Ansel Adams that said he found color distracting. But it was mostly black and white until color film came into its own. I do want to work with color, but I like working in black and white. I just think it's very powerful. Matter of fact, I wouldn't have been able to do it except for the grant I had last year. But since I'll probably never be able to afford a Leica black and white, there's 2 companies in the United States that will convert your digital camera to just all black and white. So this is only shoots monochrome now. They took out the filters in it. And it just expands your dynamic range of stuff like that. And I work with Charles to help me try to understand that better. But, you know, and I enjoy it. I just think it's very, it brings something to the piece. And I've looked at pieces in color and looked at them in black and white. Of course, you can do it with this new digital cameras. You can look at it either way. But something I haven't been out shooting much lately, to be honest with you, but something that I'm working with now is just keeping the camera set for black and white. So the minute I bring it up to my face, and I'm looking at it, you know, it could be a sunset, but I'm looking at it monochrome, you know, so I'm trying to learn that range better to work with that. It's a good question. Thank you. Anybody else?
I love your second chance sort of. I walked in with a second chance story, like coming back to it later in life. Because I walked away from life photography, which I spent a couple of decades with.
Wow.
I'm pretty inspired right now. So
Yeah. Well, the thing I'm getting more comfortable with, and again, I keep referencing to Dan Goldman, who's a mentor and a colleague of mine, and Charles, you know, is I'm growing into the fact that I'm an artist. You know, my wife, no doubt, I've been with her almost 20 years now, 16 years now, but you know, I'll go to bed and she's got a broken chair on the kitchen table in the morning. It's a shrine. You know? I'm like, whoa! You know, because she works with, you know, all the found objects and things like that. And again, if you have the energy or the curiosity, you know, we have an opening tomorrow night at the Conveyor Gallery. But yeah, you know, just getting back into that and the confidence, you know. The only character I can think of, I keep dating myself, but if you ever watch any of the old Jackie Gleason, what was that show called? The Honeymooners. Right? And, you know, raise your hand and say you've been watching. You can always find it on YouTube. But our Carney, when anything he did, he took him forever to do it. He was playing, you know, pool. He took like 10 minutes, and then Gleason would get so pissed off and start screaming at him. I'm like that with a camera sometimes. Again, the flying saucer lands, the Martians get out, I'm still fucking cleaning my lens, excuse me. I'm moving shot, and that's all. Sound familiar? You know, so letting go of that every shot doesn't have to be the Pulitzer shot. And also, there are other shots I have. There's one that's in the WAAM show. I'm going to say the word again wrong. Poughkeepsie? I always pronounce that wrong. But it's a store that sells the gowns and stuff for that beautiful ritual for the young girls. And so I was shooting a gown in the window. And then when I got in post, I realized that behind was an amazing reflection of tree branches in the sky reflecting off the glass. I didn't really see it there. But my work, for whatever time I have left, is to begin to see that more. You know, so it's not an after effect, thing like that. But thank you, Jack. Yeah, it's, you know. Oh.
If people are resistant to having their photo made, you know, if they're self-conscious or feel it could be exploited, how do you deal with that strategy? What is your approach?
Sometimes I honor it. I don't. But other times I'll walk up to them and talk to them. I'll give them my business card. I'll explain it. There are a couple, when I did the Dobbs protest rally, there were a lot of mother-daughter teams there. You know, there was a series of women, black and white, and they had these green T-shirts on. I didn't bring a picture. And I think the back said, "Fuck the Supreme Court." You know, and it was so proud. We just made it this morning. You know, but I'll try to have a conversation with people to try to deal with that. Now, there's always a tension between that and whether you're trying to get a candid shot or whatever. The Deacon, I did talk to him. He's the only person in the park. But I also thought it was a statement of respect. Also, you know, I would do that. You know, there's a lot of ethical conversations about what you shoot in street photography. You know, don't shoot the homeless, don't shoot it down. I have mixed feelings about that. You know, and I guess Gordon Parks, and I don't know, there's a gazillion artists, but Gordon Parks is one of the people that's a hero of mine. He talks about being able to use the camera as a weapon to document that. So my concern now, particularly with all the fake news and people questioning what's real and there's websites where the world is still flat and shit like that, I think it's important to document that. But when people say that, I might talk to some people around that, And I never, if somebody's passed out or overdosed or something like that, I'm more concerned over there alive about taking the picture. I think that is exploitative. But a lot of my shots, I'll take somewhat from a distance. But again, working with my mentors, I got kind of addicted to 16 to 80 Zoom for a while because you can kind of sit back and shoot. But now I'm beginning to work more, and Charles kind of personally put my, about, focus with your feet, and move around, and not just get so dependent on just sitting back. So I will talk to some people about that. Sometimes I'll take their pictures and later come up to them and show it to them. Sometimes even I took it. I said, you take a great shot. But I try to be respectful because, and particularly about the issue with children. I have a couple shots there with children, and Shirley's always reminding me, I don't display a lot of those pictures unless I can talk to the parents or get releases, because it's very sensitive. There's too much dark stuff going on the internet right now with children that I don't, if I took the picture, if I put it up there, if somebody else gets their hands on it, it could still go north on you. So there are areas that I try to respect, but I hope that answers your question, Charles. Anyone else who's not tired of me talking?
There was a great Gordon Parks show a few years back in Manhattan, and this widow spoke. Did you get to see that? It was so bananas great. What a class.
Yeah. And I also, I'm working now with a small, very small, too small group of young people over in Poughkeepsie with basic photography, point and shoot cameras and stuff like that. And I find it very interesting because, and right now, the most interested young people are the girls right now. I don't know what it is for guys, but they all have the iPhones and stuff like that. They got 100 million pictures in their phone. But if you try to get them to talk about taking a picture, they're a little guarded about it, But I'm trying to adjust to that. I'm referencing and talking to some of the other staff that work with these people a lot younger than I am because it's a different generation. They're not. And my first wake up to it was Kama, my granddaughter. I'll come up for the summer, came in for 2 weeks. She's like, look, I had 10 words in 2 weeks. She was always in the phones. I'm very, bright. She's got accepted about 20 different schools, but much more quiet, less interactive than doing that. But and there are some other programs like the Art Effect, which evolved out of a couple of other youth programs in the past where they're teaching animation and film and even curation. They have a youth group that actually curates and reviews and jurors pictures from all over the world to come to the center to do that. But I think every child should have an experience with that, trying to learn more about. And the model with the cameras is nothing new. The training I took, actually took it on Zoom, but it was out of England. It's an organization that works all over the world, and they work with recovering acts. They work with homes. They give cameras to all kinds of groups. I got an award for when I was in my first grad program. I got 2 masters somehow. But my first was from Empire State College, by the way, which is an amazing school for adult learners. Say that. They'll take your life experience credit and help you get through to the other side. But that's what I heard about programs like this. 1199, the union, I think is one of the only unions that has an art gallery in New York City, in the Union Hall. And they did the same thing. They gave cameras out to hospital workers. The people change their bedpans and see what's their perception of your reality. So we come to a hospital, come to the front doors, and we go to the emergency, whatever. We see one perspective. It's very different to see that. There's another way of helping young people to deal with. Young people to deal with their critical analysis. That's the one thing they say. One of the major criticisms of the American educational system now is that kids aren't really learning how to critically analyze things. So my thing is not just giving a kid a camera, taking a picture, but why'd you take that picture? What do you see in that picture? And that's even more challenging to do, again, because I find, and it might be me, it might be the fact that, a lot of these young children don't interact with people my age that much anymore. A lot of the families I work with and the work I've done over the last 20, 30 years, I've worked in communities where people my age aren't here anymore. They're either incarcerated or dead. Sorry, but that's in some high state communities, that's what happens. So a lot of young people grow up with grandparents raising them, and they don't have that intergenerational connection. So I think that's a part of it. Anything else, please? But thank you all for coming out. This is good for me too, because I have to kind of pull myself up and get out the next day, and even your statement is important.
It was wonderful. Thank you. Very inspiring.
All right, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Nande. Thank you for coming.
Age where everyone's.
It's very hard.